Stout lads and lassies. Well, I haven't had any complaints yet, as I sometimes feel like I'm force-feeding information. But the Mishnah is the cornerstone of Judaism. It's the way in which the rabbis designed Jews should live from the moment they rise to even how they sleep. And we've gone through the first 5 orders. Last time we went through the order of Kodashim, which dealt with sacrifices, which does not, of course, have any practical implications for this particular time in our lives. But the Mishnah is the way in which Jews were regulated to live from the time after the destruction of the temple to probably almost into the 500s of the Common Era. As a matter of fact, I've seen in National Geographic, they just have found beautiful synagogues with mosaics, of course, in the Galilee, because after the Bar Kokhba revolt of 135 CE, Jewish life moved to the Galilee, actually, and this was going to be the center of Jewish life. And this is where the Mishnah was actually codified by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So we come to the 6th order, which is probably the most far out for any, say, modern Jew, because it deals with the laws of purity and impurity. Now, to give a little background, you know, Claude Lévi-Strauss, who was a very famous anthropologist, pointed out that in more primitive times, and I don't like the word primitive, I mean, that means pre-modern, let's say in pre-modern times, people looked at the world, wherever they were, in realms, different realms of purity and realms of impurity. And this was true not only of Jews, but also of non-Jews. I remember distinctly going up to the Temple of Apollo in Delphi and seeing the pools where people who were going up to sacrifice at that temple would actually bathe before going to the temple. And there was, in Crete, I remember seeing in Phaistos, a room in the palace where the king at that particular city would purify himself. So the whole question of purity was very important. And among the ancient Jews, coming even to our own day, to be tahor meant to be pure enough that you could go up to the Temple Mount. By the way, you're not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount. All those idiots that go up to the Temple Mount, you should pardon my language, but that's what they are. They're incendiary people. They shouldn't go up. And the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel has even told them that it's not possible because they're not purified and they're not allowed on the Temple Mount. So the only thing that they're doing there is trying to excite some type of dissension with the Muslim population, which is completely ridiculous and foolish and horrible. Because the whole idea was to be pure. And interestingly enough, Flavius Josephus, Matyahu ben Yosef HaKohen, mentions in his Contra Apionem that Clearchus, who was a disciple of Aristotle, mentions that Aristotle met some Jews in Ionia, you know what I talked about before of Ionia, Western Turkey, and he thought them to be like the Hindus, who had that very strict idea of what is pure and what is impure. So here we have this whole idea of purity, and I'm not going to, we're going to go into this again and again, and I'm not going to throw too much at you, but let me say you can ask questions. One of the things about this is I want to turn the whole thing into a classroom, is that you can ask questions, but you know the whole idea of a mikvah. And the mikvah is a body of water that is not drawn. It can't be drawn water. Any mayim shuvim in a mikvah disqualifies it. It's supposed to be water that is natural, like a rainwater. And, or, of course, a lake. A lake is a perfect mikvah, so is the Atlantic Ocean. So you know about a mikvah. What you don't know is that in Borough Park, there are in the hardware stores mikvaot to be tovel kalim. That when you, strictly speaking, and this is still done by shall we say, Jews who keep these particular regulations, that when they buy new pots, they take them to a mikvah, and they put them in a sort of a basket made out of string, and they are tovel. They are immersed in the mikvah before they can be used. And there's actually a bracha, Asher Kirshana Mitzvata V'tzivanu Al Tevilat Kelim, who has made us holy with the commandments and commanded us concerning the immersion of utensils. I'm practically sure that nobody here has ever heard of that before. Now, of course, remember, whatever I tell you, if there's a lull in a cocktail party, you can always bring this up. So they are actually 10 different main sources of impurity, which are known as an av tumah, a father of impurity. But a dead person, a corpse, is known as an avi avot tumah, which is a granddaddy of impurity. And now hang on for what I'm going to tell you, that if a person comes in contact with a corpse, he or she becomes an av tumah, a father of impurity, which means that if they touch food, that food becomes a rishon l'tumah. And if there is truma, which you just read about, you know, the priestly tithe, if that unclean food, which became a sheni l'tumah, touches truma, which is something that is set aside for a kohen, which is still done in Israel, then that becomes a shlishi tumah, a third degree of impurity. And if that should have, if the temple was standing and there was a sacrifice, and that unclean truma touched a sacrifice, then that would be impure, and it would become a revi tumah. Now, I'm sure that none of you have ever heard this before, ever. And that's why I thought, you know, I know all this stuff, why shouldn't I tell you? So this is that. Now I will demonstrate. You will see now there's one of the masechtot. It's called yadayim. Now, if you're going to be exposed to all this impurity, how the heck are you going to eat? So the rabbis devised something, you know. First, you know, what's Judaism? First we forbid something, then we find a way around it. That's the rabbinic way. So what did the rabbis devise in this Masechet Yadayim, on hands? That the hands can be purified while the body still remains impure. So that's why when you come back from a cemetery, you wash your hands. What do you think you wash your hands for? Because they got dirty? No, you wash your hands because then your hands are no longer impure. And you will watch while I make the blessing, before the blessing on the bread. Now, what you have to know, and this is another interesting little quip for you, your table becomes an altar, a mizbeach. and the bread represents the sacrifice. That's why we pour salt on it, because all the sacrifices had salt poured on them. It's not because the bread needs the salt for the taste. It's because you pour salt on it because it becomes like a sacrifice. Now you understand what goes on in some Christian churches when the bread represents the sacrifice and the lamb is a man, or the man becomes a lamb. But that is, and so the washing of the hands. You will notice that when you wash the hands, you put your hands up like this, and you pour the water over so it goes down to what they call the perek, down to the wrist. And you hold the hands up, and then you do it twice. This one, that one, first this one, then that one, then this one, then that one. And then you hold the hands up, and you dry the hands, holding them up, because you don't want the water that came down below the wrist to go back and make the hands impure. Oh, you ever hear of a guy by the name of Semmelweis in Vienna? He was of Jewish origin. He's the one who invented, hello, remember Dr. Casey? Hello, Dr. Casey, the doctor holding the hands up while washing them? That's where it comes from. And so you do that, and you make the blessing on netilat yadayim, not on the washing of the hands, but on holding the hands up. The blessing is on netilat yadayim, which means on holding the hands up. And after that, you have become, your hands are pure. Even the rest of your body is impure. And so therefore, you can go to make the blessing over the bread, which you put with salt on, as it was be a sacrifice. So your shulchan becomes a mizbeach, and you become as one with the tradition of Israel. Well, is that enough for the morning, I think? Rabbi Hananya ben Akashya Amar, Ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu Zakkai Yisrael Fikach Heiber Lehem Torah Mitzvot Anais Chafetz Lamansiko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. God made the Torah great and glorious so that rabbis could have a time teaching. We continue with the Musaf Kaddish, page 155. The Musaf is found on page 166b at Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. You'll notice that after the Kedusha, you follow along with the pages. Everything is marked, but may not be that clear. 155 and then 166b.